So breaking news real quick, the Arena Football League has officially folded. So anybody who had any hopes that the Atlantic City team is coming back, the league is officially suspended all operations. They have filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. They are fully ceasing operations from the commissioner today. So that's one less football opportunity. And I know the Arena League is not like a huge springboard to get into the NFL.
I know a few guys that have played in it, yeah. Guy I played with in the AAF, guy I played with in Chicago in training camp, Malachi Jones.
Oh, he's a big Albany guy.
Yeah, up in Albany.
Our sister station in Albany, that guy up there is like a rock star.
He's a stud. I mean, he tore it up in Chicago camp, too. He's just not, difference maker enough.
It's a shame. It was a great – you worked for the team, Ryan.
Yeah,
he was the on-field host. I mean, I was surprised at how well it took off here. I thought it was – I didn't want to say it was going to be a complete failure, but I was surprised at the support that it got. And from all indication, it was getting very good support going into year number 2. They had a lot of local advertising already on board.
Yeah.
And it was – I just want to get the message out there that this isn't for those curmudgeons out there that everything fails in Atlantic City, that the town makes a lot of mistakes. They did not fail in this situation. This was an Arena Football League failure, not an Atlantic City Blackjack failure.
Yep.
It's a shame. I've been a part of a league that has folded on itself during the process of building something great, and it seemed like you guys had something good going on here.
Yeah, the city really, I think, got behind the team, supported it. Everyone that I spoke with that went to the games absolutely loved it, said they were coming back, looking forward to next year. And
I know for a fact
it's a shame, man.
The place we're at right now was on board as a major sponsor for the team next year. They were going to do the coaches show here.
And that's because of all the support it got from the city. It was a good advertising opportunity.
About it. They were. I know the owners of the place here, Tommy and Elvis. They talked to me about it. They were very excited about the potential of doing it here and making it a big thing. So, sad news today. The Arena League has issued the statement that they have filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy. John McMullen, the most famous Arena League NFL player, is?
Kurt Warner.
Kurt Warner. There you go.
Yeah, Kurt used to talk a lot about that league and about how it affected him as a quarterback, and the tight windows made him a sharper quarterback from an accuracy standpoint. Interesting because he wasn't a superstar. I mean, the AFL, especially the first incarnation before they kind of scaled back, they had a lot of guys who were sort of, quote, superstars in that environment because it was a different game and it was much closer in the tighter windows. And they had a lot of quarterbacks who really turned into just AFL players and turned into be superstars in that particular league. But Kurt obviously used it as a springboard, and he's in the NFL Hall of Fame. So he would be the most famous to me.
What NFL head coach was a very successful Arena League quarterback?
Jay Gruden.
Another one, too. Matt Nagy.
Yeah.
Matt Nagy as well, yeah. Matt Nagy, yeah. He the funny thing about Matt Nagy is he started his NFL coaching career here as an intern. And the Eagles had injuries 1 year in training camp. They needed a body to play quarterback for practice. And Matt was a coach, and they signed him for one day. And the NFL said, you can't do that. So he didn't even get to practice, but he was all geared up and ready.
All right, John, let's get into some NFL. I wanted to say, too, by the way, I could have sworn that, man, they're bringing all the All-Stars out today. Gene Allen in the house. Thank you, sir.
What's up, Coach?
I could have sworn Sean Payton played in the Arena League or coached in the Arena League, but I'm not 100% sure. But that's either here. Actually, he did. He played in the Pittsburgh Gladiators during their inaugural season. So that's neither here. Right now, the Eagles have players at wide receiver that maybe weren't good enough to play in the Arena League last week. Doug Peterson said some stuff today regarding the receivers. Do you anticipate, number one, them being healthy at that position, and number two, that we might see some changes there?
Yeah, he kind of said for the first time J.J. is going to be a starter, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Now, that means starter in 11 personnel when they use 3 receivers. So this team has completely shifted to the point they played 12 two tight ends over 70% of the time against the Seahawks. So really, that's the way they've morphed and gone with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert on the field together most of the time. But when they use three receivers, and it's looking more and more like Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar will be able to play in Miami. So it would be Jeffrey, Aguilar, and JJ, and then kind of Greg Ward mixing in from there and spelling those guys. So it looks like Matt Collins is the one taking the step back, and obviously Jordan Matthews got waived earlier this week, just didn't produce, and he got a lot of playing time the 2 weeks he was here and just didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, so it sounded like today he was kind of saying, yeah, JJ's going to get more of an opportunity. Greg Ward, that he would have a role. If Ward gets more time and JJ gets more time, who's the, maybe not odd man out, but does that mean that somebody's role is going to be diminished?
Well, I do think when it comes down to it, I don't necessarily think Nelson Aguilar's role is going to be diminished. I do think if you kind of parse through Doug's word, he said Greg is still going to have a role. And I think his role is going to be as the fourth receiver, limited snaps unless something obviously happens injury-wise, which it's happened too often so far this season. So I don't think this team is pulling the plug on Nelson Aguilar, even though I think a lot of fans would like them to do that. We talked about Dan Orlovsky earlier this week and the video cut-ups that he put together. And that kind of explains why they have an issue with younger players as far as route running, as far as not being in the position they need to be in. So that's where they're comfortable with Jeffrey and Aguilar more than the younger receivers. So I do think when those guys are healthy, and hopefully it's that this week, they're still going to be the receivers that play the most. Certainly Alshon, but also Nelson.
John, we had Sal Powell on earlier, and I want your thoughts on this because he said something that all piqued our interest a little bit regarding Greg Ward, and it's something Colin Thompson has been saying a lot as well. Get him in different types of packages, jet sweeps, wildcat, just any creative ways to get a guy like Ward who's explosive and a little bit dynamic with his skill set in different types of packages to maybe throw the Dolphins a little bit off guard this week. Do you expect anything like that with him or any other type of, new packages that we can see?
Well, I mean, they did that last week against Seattle. I mean, that's sort of the role that Nelson plays, and Greg fit into it as far as when they do use jet sweeps or something of that, or fake reverses or orbit motion or any of that sort of eye candy. It would be Nelson that turned into Greg Ward. Now you have two of those players that can do that kind of thing. Do I think, look, I advocated, Colin knows that I like Greg Ward. I think he deserves a chance. I think he deserves an opportunity. But I'm also not going to go overboard and tell you this is a guy that's going to make a significant splash as a playmaker. I mean, there's a lot of receivers in this league that are very dynamic. If you're expecting Greg Ward to be that in his second game as a pro, or Doug Peterson to game plan around him, you can't do that, especially with Alshon coming back, especially with the tight ends they have. And, yes, even Nelson Aguilar.
I think it's going to be fun to see. I don't know if it's what they have a host of weapons coming back. I mean, guys are getting healthy, kind of like what happened on the defensive side of ball. When Eagles struggled earlier in the year, the guys came back. Now the defense is responding. Offensively, guys are coming back. Hopefully the offense responds. But I want to talk a little bit about the Brandon Brooks situation. I've known a few guys in the league that struggle with some anxiety things. I myself, as a player, it's extremely pressure situations and had large amounts of anxiety before big games or really before anything when it comes to football because
real quick, one of the things, and I know somebody who had one of the things that he said he vomits before.
Yeah, I know guys that throw up every day before practice.
Yeah, that was.
But that could be a little bit different than an actual person who's dealing with anxiety. I'm no doctor. I could be wrong. That with him, I think it's both. But there's people that deal with anxiety every day that don't.
No question.
Throw up. It could just be a combination of the nerves.
I remember having, because McNabb in the playoffs, everybody kind of says he threw up in the playoff because he choked. And I said, I knew a lot of people that vomited on game days all the time, and they were the best players on the field all the time.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a sign to me because you threw up in a big game that you weren't prepared. You know what I'm saying? Like I always felt that McNabb got a bad rap for that.
And someone I'm a huge eater. Like I couldn't even imagine just throwing up and then playing on an empty stomach. Like I have my routine at halftime. I come in and eat half a banana. I'll eat Fig Newtons.
Yeah.
Like I have my routine. So when fourth quarter comes, I'm still have some fuel in me because you won't eat for like 8 hours when the fourth quarter comes around. That's a long time to perform. But I want to talk about Brandon Brooks. He struggles with anxiety stuff. John and I spoke about him coming overcoming the injury. One, that's just devastating for a man of his stature and his skill set and his work ethic, just taking him over the edge. Also, the mental health of overcoming an injury and those low points. I've had multiple surgeries on my lower body. I get the low points. What happened this week, John, and what was different this week than the past?
Well, Brandon was pretty honest about it, as he usually is, and it was the extension. It was the contract extension. And that's, everybody who has anxiety, and I think we all do at certain points.
Yeah, no
it's
question.
It's a matter of how bad it can be. And you guys talked about, I'll give you another one, Robert Smith, the old Ohio State star. He used to throw up all the time, man, all the time, every week. Had such anxiety. So it's not exactly rare, but it manifests itself in different ways for different players at different times. And with Brandon, there's triggers for everyone as well. And his trigger is his personality, which he called it a double-edged sword because it's part of the reason he's a great player and why he pushes himself, but he also puts these unrealistic expectations on himself to essentially be perfect. And that's where the anxiety trips him up. And when he got that contract and the Eagles made him the highest paid offensive guard in the league, he started thinking about it. And he started saying, they believe in me. They paid me. I got to be perfect. I got to do this. I can't make any mistakes. And that's what triggered it for him. And he's already talked it over with his therapist and the head coach and the team and his teammates and his obviously this offensive lineman who are very close, all of them, from left to right, Jason Peters on down. He thinks he's going to get over it with therapy sessions and medication, just as he did in 2016. He thinks he found the trigger. As I told you, and he thinks he'll be able to handle it moving forward. But I think the second part is people thought it was over, and it was never over. He had mentioned he threw up before games. It just wasn't as bad from when he had to miss.
I feel like you said, John, that he throws up every game,
yes.
At least every game day, if not every day.
Yes, every game day. He said he throws up. He still does. But in the past, when he's missed games, it would be nonstop. Like he cannot stop throwing up. And that's what happened to him against Seattle. He played the first series. He was throwing up before the game. He thought he got through it. He played the first series, and then he came off the field, and he was throwing up on the sidelines, and he said he hoped the cameras didn't catch it. Cameras realize usually to stay away from that stuff because other players do it. It's not that rare.
Right.
And it wouldn't stop, and so he had to remove himself from the game. So, yeah, it's not solved. It's not you don't cure yourself of these type of mental illnesses. It's always a consistent fight, and it's going to be a fight for the rest of his career and the rest of his life, and he knows that.
John, I want to go back to Ward real fast because he was asked today, Doug was, why did it take so long for him to get his shot? And I guess it kind of goes to roster breakdown, but I want to ask you, my question is kind of directed at you covering this team while he's been here the last 3 years. Have you seen a guy who deserved to make the team and couldn't because of his draft or lack thereof status and other draft statuses ahead of his, but thought that he was better than guys they kept, but they just simply couldn't keep Ward based on where he was acquired as opposed to where they were acquired?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about it all the time. If you go back and we archive all these shows at the end of training camp, I said he should have made this team. He's a better receiver than Mac Hollins and should have made the final 53. Now, We asked that question to Howie Roseman at cutdown day and said why, and Howie gave a legitimate explanation that sort of explains it in the fact that Mac is a special teams player as well. That's not Greg's forte. Remember, he was a star quarterback in college, so he didn't play special teams. He wasn't used to it. So Mac did have a big advantage. And in theory, if you're the fifth receiver on a football team, well, you have to play special teams. So it did make sense from a roster building standpoint. You need a hybrid player at that fifth spot who can play both the position and special teams. So that's part of it. But make no mistake, pedigree is also a part of it. Colin and I talked about that on Countdown to Kickoff as well. And when you're a first-round pick, and you don't have to look very far, look at this team and look at Nelson Aguilar and look at how many chances and how many opportunities he's gotten. He's going to get another opportunity when he's healthy this week in Miami, or if something happens he can't get on the field next week, whenever, he's going to get another opportunity. Whereas if you're an undrafted player, you're going to get very few and very scant opportunities. And when you get them, you got to kick down the door and you got to open people's eyes. And I think Greg Ward did that a little bit. And that's why Doug Peterson said today he's going to have a role moving forward. Best example of this, we talked about it on Countdown to Kickoff as well, is Adam Thielen. He was not only undrafted, he didn't sign as an undrafted free agent. He had to go through a rookie camp tryout, and then he eventually made a football team, excelled on special teams, injuries cropped up, he got his opportunity, he played so well they couldn't take him off the field. Today he's one of the best receivers in the NFL. That's very, very rare. I'm not saying that's what is going to happen for Greg Ward, but there are players who don't get opportunities that can play. And sometimes you'll never know because they never get the right opportunity on the right team at the right time.
I hear you, John. That's why I'm still plugging away at the XFL, because I think I'm due for another opportunity and hopefully take the best advantage of it. I've been there before, the undrafted guy. I at least signed a contract with the New York Giants. He went in undrafted minicamp free agent. This is like holding a bag for myself and the other drafted players. I mean, we're talking about crazy, crazy odds, but no, it's good to see, and it's good to see Greg Ward out there. A guy I played against a bunch in college in the American Athletic Conference at the University of Houston. But I want to move forward. I want to turn the page to Miami. I understand, we all get Miami's, a dumpster fire, for a lack of better term, at the moment. They're struggling. They snuck 2 games back to back. One in Indianapolis, which is pretty impressive. But what are the challenges for the Eagles headed into Miami? Is it Miami and overcoming being on the road, or is it getting confidence back in your quarterback and your offense that's struggled over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Eagles really have to look at this 3-game stretch against really bad opponents as an opportunity to regain that confidence on offense, get some hurt players back, get them back in the mix, and start to get that confidence back and get ready for what potentially is that Week 16 game against Dallas, which could be for the NFC East title. I can't imagine they're going to trip up in any of these 3 games. That's how bad the opponents are. I mean, today's a perfect example. Typically, when you get to practice on Wednesday and they break out the red penny jerseys, you know who they're preparing for. Last week it was Clowney, and he never ended up playing because he's got a hip injury, a core muscle injury. But the Eagles were so concerned about him. Obviously, they had Deshaun Hall in the 90s jersey. This week they got guys out there. I had to look up the players because there's nobody on the Miami Dolphins. This is the least talented team in the NFL. And you got Vince Beagle is getting a red penny jersey. All right, this isn't Jadeveon Clowney. So, Mike and I talk about tanking from the NBA perspective all the time, and the Sixers, nobody knows more about tanking than the city of Philadelphia. But I always say coaches and players don't tank. Executives tank. Executives are tanking in Miami. Brian Flores, though, deserves a ton of credit as a first-year head coach. He's got these guys playing. They won 2 games. They had no right to win any games because they're so up against it every week. And if you want to look at something, Ryan Fitzpatrick, I mean, that guy is the ultimate gunslinger. If he
ripped the Eagles last year, man, but he did have Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy, but it works 2 ways as well. I mean, he's not afraid of anything. Jim Schwartz talked about it yesterday. He will throw in tight windows. He will put stress on you, but he will also throw interceptions because he's willing. In fact, Jim said he doesn't give a you-know-what. So he will put pressure on you, and he can get hot. It's like a street shooter in the NBA. If he gets hot, look out. But that's really all you have to worry about.
John McMullen, football at 4, day off tomorrow. Happy Thanksgiving to him and your family, John. And, of course, Friday, I think you'll be doing an earlier hit with the guys because we're off at 4. But obviously it's always great to talk to you each and every day here. Our Football at 4 fans keep growing on the YouTube, but over 100,000 listens a month we get on Football at 4. So it's a football tradition like no other in this area. It's like mandatory Metallica. We do Football at 4. We appreciate it as always, pal. Happy Thanksgiving.
All right, happy Thanksgiving to you guys and all the listeners, and I thank them for going on YouTube every day and listening to us on demand. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate them. So happy Thanksgiving to everyone.